Hey, sales freaks, it's Adon here, and today I'm going to talk to you about what is the number one thing that makes a professional salesperson. Better said, what is the number one thing that defines and makes a clean freak? All right, so welcome. So today I want to talk to you about what makes a clean sales freak. What is the number one thing that is the difference between an amateur salesperson and a professional salesperson? Now, I can only use myself as the example because I can only use my journey to becoming a sales professional as the guide, as the pathway that I experienced. So what I wanted to kind of give you a backstory is, how I started, but how do a lot of people start? Obviously their stories are always different, but not everyone kind of usually gets into sales by thinking, hey, I'm going to be a salesperson. You usually kind of fall into it. And so for myself, it came from a thing of necessity, right? I very quickly was doing different jobs. As a young man, I was building log houses. I was working in a beer and wine store. I was washing dishes. I was doing all types of different jobs, trying to find my way. For a period there, I wanted to be an accountant. And I remember being an accountant and or a junior accountant, I should say. And I was going to take the Certified General Accountants program in Canada here, which is a certification. And so I got a job, and it was $1,500 a month. And to get that job, I would get up every morning at 5:30 a.m. I would take an hour and a half bus to get to the job. When I walked in the door, it was dark, during the fall. And you'd come out at lunch for a little bit and get something from the food truck, and you'd go back. And so you're in the building all day. And when you left at 4:30, 5 o'clock, I just remember it being dark. And the fellow behind me was a second or third year in an accounting program, and he was getting $1,600 a month. And the person 2 cubicles behind was getting $1,600 a month because we talked about it. And then the guy behind us, who was basically a fourth year accountant, hadn't quite got the certification yet. He was making something like $2,000 a month. And I was doing this, and I was thinking to myself, how do you, in 4 years from now, I'm going to make an extra $400. And so I then had an opportunity to get a sales job, and I went just to get a job because $1,500 a month wasn't enough for me, and I didn't really like accounting. And so when I had my sales job interview, they interviewed me, and they said it's $500 a month car allowance, $700 base salary, and the rest is commission. And I quickly went $700, $500, that's $1,300. I'm going to make at least $200 in commissions. Boom, I'm in. And so that's kind of how I started. Is I recognized that, hey, I was going to have this sales job, and I was going to go from to customers and go get new business, and it was at least going to be better than getting in this building at dark and leaving at dark and punching numbers into a computer. And so I took the job and got into sales based on necessity. That sounded great. And of course, once I got my first commission check, I recognized that, whoa, hey, this is way better. I was doing better than $2,000 a month. And so I kind of fell into it. But where the difference lies is there was so many years where you could put the label on me as far as being a salesperson, but I wasn't a professional salesperson. And that's what I really want to kind of talk about today, is what is the difference between a professional salesperson and an amateur, between someone that's actually kind of pretty good at what they do and an order taker. And for myself, I made the transition from order taker to sales professional as a general guide. Now, when I was younger, it really dictated on how focused or dedicated I was based on the sales manager I had. If they were, on top of me and they were analyzing what I was doing and stuff, I was a little bit more focused. If they let you go and kind of just said, "Oh, I don't need to monitor you," and stuff like that, I slacked. I wasn't as dedicated because I wasn't driven from within. I was simply doing a job. And so I kind of think of salespeople kind of at three levels. And for me, for a lot of my time in sales, I like to kind of look at this graph. And what the difference is, from my perspective, is that 80% of salespeople, where I used to be, it's a job, right? There's so many people that I've worked with that really, just as they're walking in the door, I can see it, that they're like, what am I going to say? Or I can't wait to hear myself speak. They have no plan, no strategy, no sales cycle, no sales process. And they get by with being a good guy, right? Or a good gal, right? They get by coming in and having a talk and talking about the birds, the bees, talking about life, talking about kids, and then introduce a new product. And the customer says, "Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can get me a sample, what have you." And that is kind of about 80% of what of salespeople, and that was me for such a long time. But through necessity, recognizing that I needed to grow sales, recognizing that I needed to feed the family, that I needed to get out of that. It took me a long time, but then I got to where I recognized that I needed to go up this grid, and this grid is what I created to kind of give a visual of what I mean. And so what the first point is in becoming a sales freak, to becoming a sales professional, not just an order taker, for me, was recognizing that I had to have commitment. I wasn't committed. I know my time as a sales manager, I would interview people. And one of the questions I would ask to really identify how committed was this person to sales, it was very, very, very telling, especially the younger generation as they were coming up, was, tell me some of the sales books that you have in your library. And most of the people I asked that question to, it was like a deer in headlights, right? You could see them thinking, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? And I remember this one guy, I interviewed him, and he was pretty good. He was well-spoken, and he had only ever read one sales book. And he could only cite the one sales book. But you know what? At least he knew the sales book, and he knew some of the things that were inside the sales book. And so he at least had something. He was like, I've read this book. And when I asked questions about other books, he would go back and he would circle back to that book. Other people, I remember distinctly one person saying to me, "Well, I don't read books. I'll watch videos, but I won't read books." And, we all get through the term readers or leaders, right? And yes, there's different modalities and there's different ways to learn. But reading and having a commitment, whether or not it's watching videos or reading or podcasts or what have you, it begins with having a commitment. And so few of the salespeople that I worked with, and when I was uncommitted, I didn't have any sales books. I had everything but sales books. I might have had some motivational books. I might have had some different CDs. But when I started getting focused, I started then focusing on being a professional. I focused on investing in myself. And so I started ordering Brian Tracy and Anthony Robbins, but particularly Brian Tracy and his Psychology of Selling and books like that. And as I started to get more committed, I started to become better at what I did. So I started to move up the ladder, where about 16% of people are where they're committed. They recognize that this is what they do. They recognize that they are a salesperson, but many people don't want to learn. I knew there was a time when I didn't want to learn. I mean, all you have to do is say to a salesperson, hey, we have sales training, and let them sit back and for the first little while, oh, I know that. Oh, I know that. Um, and as Brendan Bouchard says, common sense is not it's common practice, right? So are you practicing it? And for me, I would go, oh, sales training, what have you. Oh, I have to do the role playing or what have you. The fact is that I thought I knew it all and I wasn't committed. And so as I became more and more of a professional, more and more focused, it became more of my identity. And that's what I really want to emphasize today is what's the difference between a sales amateur and a sales professional? What makes a sales freak? Well, a freak to me is someone that's sold out, right? They're a clean freak, they're a sales freak, they're a marketing freak. It's something that they're focused on. They're obsessed with it. They're fanatical about it. They recognize that it's part of their identity. And so sales is a identity. If you're going to be good in sales, if you're going to be that, you have to have it part of your identity. So number one thing is I am a salesperson. Okay. So once you are a salesperson, you start to see things differently than my job is sales. Because my job is sales means that, at 5:01, I'm no longer a salesperson. At 8:59 a.m., I'm almost a salesperson. Right. And if you are a salesperson, if you're committed, then you are committed to the process. And if you're committed to the process, then you have a process. So what is the process? And that took me a long time, a good number of years before I started to get a sales process. I remember distinctly when I was told about spin selling. And that really revolutionized me because I could go into a meeting. I had this acronym, SPIN, spin, right? And for a long time, I never focused on the last two IN. It was always the S and the P, situation, problem, situation, problem. And so these are the day before the internet, or before the internet was big and part of our lives every day. And I could go in there and I had a process. Right? I had an identity, I had a process, and I was asking questions about their situation. And then when I found out about their situation, like how many employees they had, how many locations they had, questions that are now readily available on the internet. But then I had a process. And then I could then ask the P, what problems do you have? What issues are out there? And as soon as I started to have a process or a map or a guide, then I started to become more professional because I had a map that I could focus on. I could focus on these tactics that made me better. And once I knew the individual components, then I could become better at what I did. So for me, the shift to become a sales professional was a journey, but ultimately it narrowed down to my identity and how much I embraced it as my identity. So I am still a salesperson, but I'm also metamorphosed myself. I am transforming myself. I am becoming marketer as well, because it's obviously very, very critical to success now with the internet. So now I am sales and marketing. So we can have a few different identities, but it's important to recognize that it is our identity. So that was the defining moment for me. My question to you is where are you in the process? If you need to make more money, if you need to be more successful, if you need to grow revenue, if you need to make a difference, if you need to be better, if the livelihood of your family, the livelihood of you is dependent on it, then the fundamental shift is making it part of your identity. And I can't emphasize that enough is, do you tell people I'm a sales professional? Do you tell people with great pride and conviction? Do you study? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you read books? Do you watch videos? Are you encircled with information and knowledge coming at you? And of course, you take what you like and what you don't like, and you listen to who you like and who resonates with you. But do you? Do you get into the car and listen to music, or do you get into the car and listen to podcasts? Now, there's nothing wrong with listening to music. Of course, there's nothing wrong with escaping and reading different books that are non-business related. But Are you surrounding yourself at parts throughout the day, the week, the month, the year that helps you improve your identity, helps you improve your knowledge? So really, really can't overestimate this enough, is the fundamental shift to sales is making it your identity. And you need to recognize that in order to be better, you have to do better. And most of us need to have more knowledge, but we need to apply that knowledge. So one thing that really, really helped me was having a process. And for sales, one of the things I would start off with is what questions to ask, right? If you know the questions you're going to ask, then you have some type of a roadmap. And before that is, what's your story? What is the story? What is your point of differentiation? Different topic for a different day. So you have your story or your strategy. Now your questions are based around your strategy. Now, a good process for asking questions that really works for me is the go ask process. Okay, GO, and these are questions you ask. So the first question, or the G, is goals. What is the goals of your prospect when you're talking to him or her? What are the goals or objectives for the year? So we're coming into where we're going to head into 2021. Right. So now is a great time to start asking, Mr. Customer, in 2021, what is the goals of this organization? Like, how much do you guys want to grow? Who's your customer base? Where do you personally want to be within the company in 5 years? Right? Understand what their regional, national, and personal goals are. So goals, their goals and objectives as a company, but also as an individual, really will give you some insight as to where they want to go. And then when you recognize where they want to go, what their goals are, how can you fit into that? How can you help support that? So goals. The O is operations, right? They're the operations. So one is looking at the demand side of their business, their goals, right? How they create demand, how they're going to grow. Some call it the value proposition. And then, of course, their operations, the way that they do things internally, the way they create the way they fill demand. So customer, the demand side, and the supply side. How do they fulfill? How do they get customers? How do they fulfill that customer? And that's the operations. So that is the operations, or the value chain, which is the supply side, and the value proposition, which is the demand side. And that makes up the value creation process. And so when you understand how your customer, by asking questions, it creates value both on the supply side and on the demand side, you can see how you can fit into that. You may fit into it in a great global picture where you can really add value to the company nationally. Perhaps it's only regionally, and perhaps it's only to that individual. But if you can help that individual move up the ladder within their organization by making them look good, by changing and helping them grow sales or helping them reduce their costs, then you add value to that individual. So really it begins with having an identity. And then once you have an identity and you own it, then it's having a process. And for me, I like to use the go ask, goals and operations. So recognize the importance of asking goal questions, and recognize the importance of asking operation questions, because really sales is about persuasion or influence, and the way to persuade and influence somebody is to ask them questions geared with a goal in mind. Where are you trying to get them to? And ask them questions so they can see the world through the eyes of you, through your eyes. And when they have that aha moment, when you lead them to self-discovery, then you will have a customer, and you will transform that customer into a client and ultimately a raving fan. I hope this has been of value to you today. Recognize that if you have not made sales your identity, start today by saying, I am a salesperson. I'm Adon Rigg, and you've been watching Clean Freak. I will see you in the next episode.